Hey, I wanted to record a really quick intro to this video. I actually filmed this about a month or a month and a half ago, and it was a follow-up to the video that I made called Pro-Life versus Pro-Choice, and just talking about and elaborating on that conversation. Now, since then, some big things happened in my life, and I didn't publish or finish editing this video for quite a while, and then everything happened with Charlie Kirk, and I made that video about him. And the reason that that's significant is because in this pro-life versus choice video, I specifically referenced him and his surrounded video where he spent a lot of time talking about that particular conversation. So I just wanted to express, before I play the video that I filmed, that this video was made before then. I didn't actually reference him in this, but because of the connection to him, I just wanted to express the time gap in this and what took place since then and why it took me some time to get this thing published. So without further ado, here's the video. I hope you enjoy. Some of the subjects in this have the potential to be very sensitive. I talk about some things that might be controversial, but at the same time, this was a lot of me thinking about this conversation and just trying to find a higher understanding and playing with different thought loopholes that might make sense in the grand scheme of things. So please, again, take it with a grain of salt and please enjoy. All right, so the first thing is I have to acknowledge every time that I do like a fast or something and then I show up on the internet, I get so many comments of people being like, "You look so malnourished, are you okay?" I acknowledge I look a little skinnier than normal. But let's just put that aside for the moment because there's something that I actually came to in the last week or so that I really want to talk about. This is kind of a realization about one of my earlier videos. So do you remember when I made, if you've seen it, if you've been following along, I did a video called Pro-Life versus Pro-Choice and really just talked about the entire sticky situation, the tension that everyone feels or there's so much controversy around on both sides of the argument. And I didn't really close that video, with like a, here's my thoughts on what the highest answer would be, but I put out a lot of information about looking at both sides, how it looks to me anyways, and maybe what makes sense. And like in the big picture, what I kind of got was like a gradient spectrum where in most cases, it's kind of like when conception takes place, you have this it's like you have the life force energy, the life energy of the mother and the father coming together to make a vehicle for a new soul to come in. But there's this time where the soul doesn't come in, and then there's this gradient of when the pineal gland is forming, and then afterwards, once that pineal gland is formed, maybe then it's better not to have an abortion. And so it kind of goes from one sliding scale to the other, and I was like, okay, that is a good visualization of how maybe we can kind of universally approach this. However, some other things came to me in the last couple of weeks, and the last week especially, that really landed and hit, and I was like, oh, there's some other elements of this. And what I came to was, it's like we have this like pro-choice versus pro-life. What if there is actually a third category? And I'm like, yeah, if there was one, this is what I'd call it, and where I'd subscribe myself to be, which is pro-understanding. And it's kind of funny because imagine you're in a conversation and someone's like, well, are you pro-choice or are you pro-life? And you're like, I'm pro-understanding. And they're like, what does that mean? And you're like, well, it means that I understand just how complex of a subject this is. And maybe from that place of understanding, on sometimes a case-by-case basis, there's something for us to go deeper into. Like, I understand that for some people, it's really rigid on like, no, it always needs to be choice or life, I was just thinking, like, this is gonna be maybe a weird example, but like, just flow with me on this. And I'm not sharing this to suggest that this is the definitive be-all, absolute, highest understanding. But this is something to play with, and I'm just putting it out into the collective so that we can all kind of think about it. So if you have thoughts on this subject, share them in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. So, but here's the thing. Let's just go back and imagine the two people, one's a character, one's a person, in real life that I was thinking about. One was Hitler, and then the other was Lord Voldemort. And like, imagine for a moment, there's this, oh gosh, there's a funny video by How It Should Have Ended. You know, if you've ever seen those cartoons online. And they did one like How Harry Potter Should Have Ended. And there was this funny scene where Snape takes a time turner and he's like, 400,025, 400,026. He's turning the time turner back like a bajillion times to go back in time to when Tom Riddle was a little kid. And he just shows up and he's like, Havana Kedavra! And he kills him. and he's like stuck back in time. And, you know, people in that timeline, if they saw that back then, they'd be like, what are you doing killing this child? And he's like, you have no idea how important it was that we did that. It's like, okay. And then I thought, similarly, like, what about Hitler? I know this is crazy, right? But like, let's just imagine for a moment that whoever Hitler's mom was, at a young age or while Hitler was in the womb, if she knew, let's say that she's virtuous, that she's a good person and everything like that, she knows what's going to happen in the future, and let's just say that she has that information, then you're like, does it actually make sense that that would be the best possible thing to do? You know, it's just like, maybe we just abort this child, you know? And then what's crazy is this hit me. This is wild. There's actually I would say a biblical story. It's not biblical, but it's in the Quran, actually. And I've talked about so many different mystic teachings and books before, and sometimes on Spirit Science I get comments like, what about Islam? What, have you read the Quran? Let's talk about Allah, and let's talk about that faith. And I haven't really spoken about it so much. However, there's a story in the Quran that's very relative to this. And in the story, it says that there's this prophet, Al-Qadir, I think his name is, and he's a teacher of Moses. And he takes Moses on this journey, and Moses is like, please, you are this great prophet, you have to teach me. And Al-Qadir is like, all right, I will take you on this journey, and I'm gonna show you 3 things that you are going to hate, and you will not understand them at all. And yet, what I'm doing is the right thing to do. And so in this story, how it goes is that Al-Qadir, he destroys, there's like a harmonious village or something like this. And he sees the village and he destroys these boats of these like fishermen who are completely innocent and have done nothing. And Moses is like, oh, why are you doing this? Why are you destroying these boats? And the prophet is like, see, I told you need to trust me, and you're not trusting me. And he's like, you see, in the very near future, this evil king over here is gonna come and raid this village. He is gonna take all of these boats and use them for his army, and he is gonna destroy this village and that village and all of these people. So by burning these boats now, I am stopping this bad event from taking place in the future. And Moses eventually, when he hears the answer, he's like, I didn't get it. So then the story goes on, and what happens is there's this child in a village, and Moses and the prophet, they go into this town, and the prophet takes the child and he kills him in front of the mother and in front of Moses. And Moses again is like, you just murdered a child. How could you do this? And once again, the prophet is like, you didn't understand. You have to know what's going on here. And he finally explains it to him, and he says, this child is going to grow up to be a tyrant. You see the parallel in this argument, in this conversation. This child's gonna grow up into a complete monster, and he is gonna murder all of these people. And God wants to give this mother and this family a good child, a righteous one. And so I'm taking away this one so that all of these people in the future will be protected, and this mother can have a good child growing up. And once again, Moses is like, just doesn't understand. And he's starting to get it. And I think, I kind of forget, but it might be at the very end that the prophet reveals all these things, but just flow with it. Like, you can look it up. Look up Al-Qadir, Moses, ask AI, and you can get the whole story. Or Google it or whatever. But then there's a final one, and it has to do with, there's this wall or something, and the prophet ends up like destroying the wall of a town or a village. Moses gets all mad, how could you do this? And then eventually it comes out that there's like some treasure buried under the wall and it was going to go to the wrong people. And then Moses, again, he kind of gets the explanation that now that, thing that was buried, the treasure will go to the right people. That ended up actually being for the best path for everybody. So you can look up all the details. It doesn't really matter so much on the last one. I'm just trying to provide the context. And the second story is the one that stood out to me because with this like pro-life, pro-choice, sometimes, again, on that like right-wing side, there's this perspective that no matter what, if there's conception, there should be life. And I even said in the earlier video, I ended up kind of trimming this section at the very end once it was published. But the thing, I was like, maybe we should be pro-life, but also have a choice. And the way that I'm thinking about it now is this with like pro-understanding, it's really kind of on a case-by-case basis that can be universally applied, that we can still be in support of life, like in the sense that, someone told me or someone posted a comment on that video and they said, you commented and said, what if having this child is going to ruin everything for the mother and the child's going to have a bad life and it could be terrible. And there's this other pathway, like what if actually having the child could be for the best thing for everyone? And, the thing is, that's also true. But with pro-understanding, you can weigh both of them and make the best possible decision from a higher understanding of the current situation. Again, I don't think that the situation that I'm speaking to, like with Hitler or Voldemort or whatever, applies to everyone. I don't think that that's very often the case, but I think sometimes it can be. And at the very least, maybe we can collectively, again, I'm just putting it out there. Please make your own decision, have your own experience. Take what I'm saying with a grain of salt if you like, or a dash of pepper if you prefer. My suggestion ultimately comes down to let's raise our thinking to a higher level and let's try to approach not just this, but all controversial subjects and really sensitive, difficult subjects from the highest place of truth and weigh everything against the metric of the light in our heart and love in our heart and the peace and beauty and grace within our mind and highest understanding that we can. Like with the 1,000-petaled lotus opening up, like you're probably familiar with that whole Buddhist Hindu concept, the Buddhist concept of the chakras and the 1,000-petal lotus. But either way, I think that's probably it for this one. I'm afraid I think this video might end up, I have no idea how this is going to be received, well or not. But I wanted to put it out there because after the past, again, couple of weeks and just some of the realizations that I've had and thinking about this subject, I wanted to conclude the conversation, at least up till now, and maybe I'll end up having more to say about it later, because when you post comments, I end up usually thinking a lot about what it is that's, just the nature of the conversation. I know, I'm still rambling here. Maybe this is relevant. One person commented and they said, life is life no matter what. But then you have to think, what is life? Because when we factor in the life force versus the soul force, and if we see those things as potentially different but interrelated, again, it opens up the dialogue, at least in my mind, to exploring a wider array of understanding around the whole thing. So that's it for this one. Thank you very much for watching. Leave a great comment or an angry one if you're mad at me. And I love you so much. And yeah, peace out.